Hello and welcome to the presentation of Piezoelectric Shearing, Hypothesis of Carving Stone with Charge. First, a primer, the piezoelectric effect in quartz. As many of you may know, quartz has a lattice structure made of silicon and oxygen with balanced charges. With the way this works, you basically have one positive silicon with a negative oxygen that are usually balanced within the structure. And this structure is uniform throughout a crystal. If you compare the crystal to something like glass that's ununiform, you do not get a piezoelectric effect with most glasses because of the great imbalances there are between charges and having little to no compressive and tension ability. So the idea of quartz crystal in this lattice structure is it gives it strength and it gives it the ability to have this effect depending on where it's tensioned. So basically, as you have the quartz compressed or it receives tension, it creates a voltage of charge depending on the arrangement of the electrons within the structures. So you have this idea that you can get a positive charge during a certain type of compression depending on the orientation of the crystal, or you can have a negative charge in the opposite direction with tension. This all depends on crystal arrangement. So the idea is too that you can also apply a charge to the crystal and it will begin mechanical action. So basically, if you give it a positive charge, the structure will arrange itself to meet that charge, or you give it a negative charge, it will arrange itself to meet that charge. So this is often used in modern devices such as piezoelectric buzzers, piezoelectric speakers, microphones. You also have devices such as water type of humidifiers. They can basically have a sonic vibration of quartz that causes water to become a mist. It's like a mist creator. So there's a lot of applications that we have in our modern electronics due to quartz. So the idea is that you can well, let's get into the primer first. Let's talk about shearing and slip planes. In just basic material science, you have this idea of slip planes that may occur based on the alignment of certain materials and their molecules. When you have an arrangement of openings, basically, between molecules that are aligned, we call this a slip plane. The slip planes are the most susceptible to shearing, and they become easier to shear at those points. There's a lot of material science that goes into the idea of how to utilize slip planes in order to maximize cutting and when to know how to determine your material strength. So the idea is that you can put a load on a quartz crystal to a point where it is pushed beyond its mechanical limits. So basically, it's basically shearing itself in a way that it cannot recover. It goes beyond what we call plastic deformation. It can no longer recover its original shape. So in some cases, it completely breaks. In the case of this picture, we have a piezoelectric buzzer that is being pushed. It has a load of about 1,000 volts, and it's this demonstration was being put through a series of different frequencies. And at the correct resonant frequency, the piezoelectric buzzer destroyed itself. So the idea also applies on a macro scale if quartz is part of another substance, such as sedimentary rock. Here we have an example of granite. So depending on the amount of quartz that's destroyed, you can create multiple slip planes within a material. This material may erode if enough slip planes are created, or it becomes easier to work with. In a lot of these sedimentary rock, such as granite, quartz is the hardest substance within that material. So we start looking at the idea, the composition of how much quartz makes up sedimentary rock. We have a very large scale that involves with it basically, but you also do see that there's a number of large solid rocks that are also seen anciently, such as basalts that were carved, but would not have enough quartz to utilize the piezoelectric effect. Though you start getting into a range of like this chart doesn't show diorite, but diorite does have from less to 1.5% to up to 20% quartz content, and would also be susceptible to this type of working. But the idea is that if it doesn't have a piezoelectric effect, you can't use this principle for it. But there's another way to work around that. The idea of carving basalt with a piezoelectric effect is the idea of using quartz that you may have gathered or quartz that you have available to yourself in order to make the tools that you're working with more effective in cutting by basically creating a rudimentary sonic tool. A lot of sonic tooling today uses mechanical action for vibration, but you can use the piezoelectric effect for increased carving of even basalt, as quartz is harder than basalt in general. And we can get into the principles of hardness. Is that basically what we have here is that we have quartz on the Mohs hardness scale is about a 7. Feldspar, which is also in granite, is at a 6. Basalt ranges between 5.5 to 6 depending on its composition. It's usually softer than granite. But if we're using the piezoelectric effect to erode granite, it gives us a leftover components that will be made up of feldspar, mica, and quartz. Feldspar and quartz would quartz basically having the piezoelectric effect still in a smaller granular shape. Feldspar also acting as an abrasive. And then the added benefit of having mica within quartz would act as a dry lubricant, which actually would make a lot of this work also easier as well. So you'd be able to use leftover granite with the piezoelectric effect to work on basalt. So the conclusion is the piezoelectric effect is easy to produce without advanced electronics. The idea is that ancient people may have been using atmospheric electricity along with capacitors made of perhaps glass and gold, or wood and gold, or wood and silver. There's a lot of these different materials that we find. We find them already in a lot of these tombs. Like we have archaeologists and anthropologists that look at them with an eye that assumes that all the dealings of ancient men had to do with deities and gods and myth, rather than making the assumption that perhaps ancient people knew what they were doing, that they weren't making medicine on accident, that they understood some fundamental levels of science, and perhaps that was just lost with time. But materials like granite may be enticed to crumble under the right potential charge, and if they contain quartz, or another piezoelectric material. So that wouldn't be limited to just granite. There's a lot of different materials that are piezoelectric, but specifically with sedimentary rock, there's a large content of quartz to choose from. And then, of course, the granite powder may be used in conjunction with the piezoelectric effect to provide more tooling opportunities to these ancient people to work on materials such as basalt. So that's been my conclusion. Just want to point out a few resources. The first two are from Russian scientists that have been working on the idea of using electrical discharge in order to destroy rock. They've been working, looks like, on this since the 90s in Russia. Only a few of the papers in the last 5 to 8 years have been translated into English. So I'd recommend checking these descriptions out. I'll have a link to the slideshow in the description. We also have the idea of the slip planes in quartz and interformed rock. That's from a geology paper as well. You can kind of see how geologists think of quartz and slip planes on a geological scale. I have a link to that video where the person destroys a piezoelectric speaker with his 1,000 volts and a certain frequency. You'll see him play with the ranges. It's about halfway through the video, so you can probably skip around. My data for the rock hardness comes from this manufacturer. I think it's a quarry type industry magnet. Then we have understanding quartz crystal. Of course, comes from another manufacturer of quartz that has kind of like a very basic lowdown on quartz in general as they're used in the modern time. Also, if you haven't checked out Brian Forrester, I think I misspelled his name right here, but he actually does go out to some of these ancient sites and as well as the museums in Cairo to kind of show you the different things that the ancients have worked on and what he sees as ancient high technology. He he does come to the conclusion, or it does not conclusion, but rather he speculates on the idea of tools like circular saws with diamond tips. Of course, we haven't found anything like that in the ground to verify that hypothesis. But the idea is, if they had a mastery of the piezoelectric effect, they can basically come up with the same tooling marks, but the caveat being we've already found all the tools necessary to do that within the ancient Egyptian sites. And it's just a matter of having people that understand the principles of atmospheric electricity and the piezoelectric effect and having access to some of these artifacts to see what their electrical properties are. I am finding almost worryingly that many artifacts are no longer available, such as from the Carter expedition in the early 1900s. Many of those artifacts are no longer available online to even see, such as the bull's tail that was found under a priest during Carter's expedition. I can no longer find that artifact online, even though I've printed up that artifact. And it was basically a tail that a priest of Ptah would wear that was made of glass and gold. So it's a lot to consider, but I'll leave that for your consideration. But I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.